I'll bring it Wednesday. Wait a minute. Go ahead. Oh, here you go. Now, look at this. It's the same little outfit. That's me. That's our oldest granddaughter. The same outfit. And then this is our youngest one. And if I can, I think it's in our cedar chest. I'll bring you. I'm going to bring the outfit so you can see. Because the little skirt's like this big. I mean, that is just something so cool. Oh, it is. I thought, I got that outfit. My mother had sent it to me. I thought, before she passed away, and I thought, well, I could get the girls at the right age. And I tell you what, we get them at the age.
Welcome. Hope you enjoy those.
That fringe. Open these?
1 minute.
Oh, I am so excited.
I hadn't read it yet, and so when I saw you, thank you for log in here.
Yeah. Okay.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you for coming to Albany's City Council work session, Monday, December 12th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Before I call the meeting to order, I would like you to know that I've invited the Long Road Walking soldiers to come in and say hi. They've left VFW 584 about 30 minutes ago. So if you don't know who they are, they walk from Boston. They're walking from Boston to Newport, Oregon on Highway 20. And so if they do stop by, I will pause the meeting to invite them in.
Mr. Mayor, I would just caution you against calling them soldiers because they're
veterans.
Marines.
They're veterans.
Former Marines.
Former Marines. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. You're always a Marine. You're either present or former. Right. Right. So thank you. Now let's call the meeting to order and roll call, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Alex Johnson II.
Here.
Councilors Olson,
Here.
Novak,
Here.
Bartholomew,
Here.
Kopczynski,
Here.
Bessie Johnson,
Here.
and Smith.
Here.
All members present, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Gabe, is there any business from the public? Thank you. We have two members signed up to speak public. Peggy Burris, Executive Director of the Carousel.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? How's that?
Better.
Okay, perfect. Hello, I'm Peggy Burris, co-chair of the TLT Advisory Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you and to speak with you today. The TLT committee did make some recommendations for changes to the proposed policy. One thing worth noting is the memo states this: transitions the current TLT Advisory Committee into a dedicated Tourism Advisory Committee. This change removes the review and recommendation process from the TLT Advisory Committee currently described on the city's website with this charge. The TLT Advisory Committee reviews actual transit lodging tax revenues and any implications to the allocation methodology described in policy number F-12-11-002, Transit Lodging Tax Policy, and may recommend changes to the allocation methodology or this policy to the City Council, established by City Council policy, to simply reviewing activities and the expenditures for tourism activities. Along with the change in the name from Transit Lodging Tax, TLT Advisory Committee, to Tourism Advisory Committee, The wording of the proposed policy further limits the committee's input on both TLT revenues and expenditures. By maintaining the current name of the committee and making a small change in the second paragraph of the proposed policy, the TLT committee could maintain the current role, which I believe was the expressed intent by council when the consolidation of the Citizen Advisory Committee came up for review and approval earlier this year. Peter indicated during the October 24th, 2022 work session that the role of the TLT committee would not be changed. We would like to recommend the following wording for second paragraph in the proposed policy. This policy also establishes a transit lodging tax TLT advisory committee. The committee may meet as needed to discuss tourism-related activities, opportunities, and challenges, review and oversee tourism programs, advise on TLT revenues and expenditures, and advise the City Council on tourism matters. The committee will also award collaborative tourism promotion, CTP, grants, should those funds exist in the budget. Retaining the existing committee name and making this small change allows the committee to make recommendations on revenue opportunities, such as when it was suggested to include the short-term rentals and collecting TLT. There may be further opportunities to increase revenues as well. This allows more transparency for the expenditure of those revenues and the best possible return on investment by the city. More citizen input and advisory commission review recommendations will help the city budget committee and city council to make more informed decisions. I'm out of time. The good news is there's a paragraph in the back that you'll all get in my handout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get a copy of that. You are? Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Tom Cordier. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, so are we going to get copies of your comments? And you're going to pass them out? Thank you.
Mr. Cordier?
Ray's got a question, I think.
Who?
Mr. Kopsinski?
Yes.
Based on what I just heard, I don't perceive any angst with what she said. It seems like a very innocuous change and could easily be put in there without any problems whatsoever.
What's on the agenda to discuss later on?
Yeah, later, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It's on the agenda to discuss. I don't want to take time for Mr. Cordier.
Tom Cordier, North Albany.
Reset the clock, please.
Pardon me?
I'm talking to my staff, talking to staff. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm here today to issue a comment, maybe better word is a reprimand to Councilor Johnson for her disrespectful comment to my councilman, Dick Olson, on November 28th City Council meeting. Councilman Olson did not violate any public meeting law regarding executive meetings of the council. Her public comment was inappropriate and was not justified and lacked credibility because the law she stated does not exist. And so even further, her comments in the newspaper were inappropriate. I have another comment to the newly elected council persons. The city is long on money, but short on good ideas. So I'm suggesting to the new members that they would get opinions from 50-year service members before they make decisions about money for the first year of their service. Thank you. Any comment? Question?
Not the time for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
you.
Next on the agenda, any persons that did not sign up to speak will willing to address the council? Thank you. Next on the agenda is a public transit update from Barry Hoffman, a verbal update. Is this what the PowerPoint was with? Okay. The PowerPoint was handed out to all of us on the council.
Hello, Mayor and councilors. Can you hear me? Great. Now I have to launch the PowerPoint, so technology, we'll see.
And please put the mic a little closer to your mouth.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Even better?
It should be more
Closer,
like-
closer, closer, closer. There we go. Hey.
That's better.
Okay. Share content. Screen. Start broadcast. I'm on my way here, folks. Start broadcast. 3, 2, 1. It's counting down for me.
There we go.
And now, if I can just get to the right screen, we'll all be great.
Director Bailey, can you help him?
I'm good so far. This is a computer that's not mine, so from start. Fabulous.
There we go.
Hello. It's been some time since I was last in front of you. It was about December of last year, 2021. And we've had some great things that have happened. And I want to talk about what's still in the works and to come. And then we can have some discussion. So I'll run through my PowerPoint. I'll be respectful of time because I know that there's a pretty packed agenda. And some of this is just rehashing old information. So I'm going to go rather quickly, but please stop me if you want to chime in on something. You remember our buses? These were our new ones. They are a couple years old now, but they're doing very well, running every day on the street. We're pretty proud of those. In 2021, in December of 2021, the Loop expanded its service. Service hours were extended late into the evening, and the routes were separated. We created a new route, which is the Heart to Hub Uniter route, uniting the heart of the valley, Corvallis, to the hub city of Albany. And that's been really great to be a part of and lead. So pretty happy with how that all has happened. We hired 6 FTE transit operators at that time in order to accomplish the Loop expansion. And so we now have a staff of 10 full-time transit operators at the moment. This was the old Benton Loop schedule. You're probably, I don't want to look at it, it hurts my eyes. And then the new Loop schedule, you can see just by looking at the times listed, those are just time points in the day, how much more service we offer today than we did back then. And so, ridership on the Loop, I'm kind of highlighting the Loop to start here. That arrow in the center is December of 2021. That's when we started expanded service. And we were, obviously, 19 and 20 were pretty low years due to the pandemic. But we've been climbing. And then this year is the green line. We're climbing back up to ridership that you might see pre-pandemic. So it's really great to have people back on the bus, utilizing the Loop, going back and forth between our communities. And we are offering more service today than we did in the old days, but we are starting to get back to normal ridership, in quotation marks. Talk about ATS for a second, or a minute. This is stuff you've seen before. There was a development plan that we went through, process. The plan can be found on the City of Albany website, and that is the link at the bottom. Now, this is still the existing Albany transit system, 2 routes and 2 big loops going around. However, we have undergone planning, and we've shown you this before. It's been a while yet, but the planned ATS routes are still in the works here. And just kind of rehashing again, more routes will give more options for people to get around. There'll be out and back style routes, so more frequent service along corridors, more direct for many common trips. They're going to be timed together to make connections and better plan to serve West Albany High School and South Albany High School students.
Good.
And it's designed to run on schedule, which has been a problem with our service for a long time now. Some of the, I don't know what we'll call these, I guess highlighted issues. There are a few areas that lose service, namely North Albany, north of the Albany Park and Ride, South Albany below 35th Street on Waverly, although I talked before about that to the council that I really want to try to get below where we serve today, which is, there goes the name of the street right on my brain. But anyway, down Columbus, below South Albany.
Ellingson Road,
We turn on, it's out of my brain. It's not going to come back.
Del Rio.
Del Rio, that's where we turn. Thank you. Some bus stops will need to be moved or eliminated. And then the highlight here is the yellow box. New bus stops will need to be created. All new stops must be ADA accessible. And then something that's going to happen is the system may be more confusing for some passengers to navigate. That's just inevitable when you have more buses.
Change.
Yep, change is hard. AMPO worked with us on the TDP. Nelson Nygaard was the consultant group. We've been continued to work with Nelson Nygaard through 2021 and into 22 to develop an implementation strategy, which is what I'm going to highlight next. And then, so you told us, I told you new ATS was coming as soon as last winter. What happened? And it's 2 words, bus stops. And I'm about to explain. There's a few people waiting at a bus stop. So in order for the planned new routes to be effective, we knew new bus stops were going to have to be built. ATS was awarded expansion funding in the name of about $450,000 a year through 21-23. However, this funding could not be used to construct bus stops. It was I don't want to call it a hiccup in the law or a hiccup in the application process. When you apply for operating, you can't use operating dollars for capital. And so when we went to spend some money to build bus stops, we were told, you can't reimburse that money from an operating grant. A little bit of a misstep, but anyway, with the assistance of the Lynn County TAC, we created a new project that allowed Albany to use the funds, those existing funds, for the construction of bus stops. That project funding was approved by the Lynn County TAC in September of 2022, so just a few months ago. And we were ready. We had done a lot of the background work. We knew where the stops were going to go. The engineering staff up at City Hall here had the drawings ready, and as soon as we had the funds available, we went out to bid for that job. You probably have seen some stops maybe being created in the neighborhoods of the places we're going to serve, and I'm going to move ahead a slide. Rehashing pretty much what I said, other than want to remind that all new stops are required to meet Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. So gone are the days when we can just pound a post in the ground and put a sign on it and call it a bus stop. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not unfortunate; it's for the right reason. So there's some bus stops here. I'm going to show you on the next slide. No, maybe. Now I don't remember. Actually, council approved removing parking for some bus stops a couple months ago. Also, council approved the construction contract for the bus stops about a month and a half ago. They are out there working. They should be done building the first phase of bus stops by the first of this 2023. So once the stops are constructed, we can hire the drivers and get the service initiated. This is a little hard to see. It's really small, and if you don't have it in color, it might be harder to see, but this will get shared hopefully a lot electronically. And it shows where the bus stops are, where the proposed stops are, and where potential bus stop locations in the long term are. And I'm going to slide ahead here. Oops. So some bus stops are going to be more complicated. Stops along ODOT right-of-way or anywhere that we need to have acquisition of property or easements created are going to be more complicated. They're going to come along in a second phase of bus stop construction. So those more difficult to build stops will be in a different capital project than today, but we're not going to wait for those. We're going to get going with the new service before all the stops can be built that we want to build. So really, how close are we? The routes are ready. The route timing, the coordination, the bus schedule design is ready. We need to hire 4 FTE operators and train them. The existing operators need to be trained. We've had them out driving these routes before, but it's been some time for them as well. So we need to get our regular folks out learning the routes. The bus stops around one are under construction. The public will have to be informed at least a few weeks ahead of launch. And we're going to do that with news releases, websites, social media, our normal outlets. And then we have to go electronically now. We have to send everything to Google so that people can plan trips. We're close.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
In your future presentations, it's okay to use black ink because white,
Contrast.
yeah, it's just contrast. It's just hard to see, especially with the small text it is.
I apologize for that.
Thank you.
So speaking of hiring drivers, we will return to the next regular council meeting to request additional FTE of transit operators. Once those drivers are hired and trained and our existing drivers are trained, we can announce and begin a date for the expanded ATS service, likely to commence spring of 2024. I'm really excited about this. This has been 10 years coming. So if I don't project it and I seem nervous, it's just because I'm sitting here in front of you. Fares. This is off the subject, but something I want to just briefly talk about. In the pandemic, ATS, Loop, and Coloride have been operating fareless since then. The Loop Board defers to the Albany City Council to decide if and when to reinstitute fares. And if the council desires, I will return with a more detailed presentation on fares, the budgetary impacts of fares, and the pros and cons, quite frankly, of what fares mean to the riders and to the budgets. And to re-implement fares, it may require a public hearing to reestablish the fares.
A question for you. Do we advertise, do you sell advertising space on the side of buses?
We don't currently. We haven't in a number of years. And we could. It's income that we could earn.
I'm bringing it up because, you go to other cities like Portland, Salem. I don't want to see my face on the side of a bus, but I'd like to see my logo on the side of a bus.
Nobody wants to see my face on
Right.
the bus.
But there's real estate agents, there's opportunity for nonprofits to advertise. It could be an income stream that would further justify us having fareless riders. Because I know companies want to see their business and everyone driving around town with your logo on it, it makes you more profitable, but also keeps it so we can be fareless.
And I'll be happy to look a little bit more into that. We used to do advertising on the side of the buses, and the contractor that did that was unable to continue with us. We would have to hire a new contractor, which might involve as detailed as going out for an RFP because of the.
Oh, I understand, yeah.
But that's certainly something we could look into.
I think it's a good idea.
Well, right? Wouldn't it be a good idea to
It's a good idea.
especially if we decide to remain fareless, there's some way to add revenue. And those buses, the one I was gonna do in Salem was like 20 grand for a year, but it was on every route, so. And
Best,
that
the
was a
best
small
example
one.
I can get is from Corvallis. I'll get with my compadres in Corvallis, and I'll find out what they're earning on their buses, because they do
Perfect.
advertising. And I'll bring that back when we talk about fares.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just had a quick question. 2 years ago, did we decide as a council to go fareless? Or is it just something that was done?
I
So
think we
is
decided,
it
I
just
think,
like,
I think it was decided because of the pandemic,
yeah,
getting people around.
so if
access.
it was kind of like suspended, maybe it wouldn't take an active council to reinstate the fares.
Can we find out can you go back and look at that?
Okay.
I think the FTA would probably want to weigh in as to whether they would think a hearing would be necessary.
Oh. Okay.
It's an equality issue, right? So I'll also get in touch with the
Okay.
FTA and find
Great,
out what
thanks.
they want us to do.
Okay, Counselor Novak was next.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm in favor of doing whatever we can, whatever other forms of advertising, what you just suggested, in order to continue fareless riding. I think that people are hard-pressed these days, and the folks that are using public transit are probably harder pressed than anyone else. So if we can maintain the service and keep it free, I'm all for that.
Great.
Thank you.
Me too.
Counselor Smith, you had something?
There's good information in that 2018 report to AMPO about fares and for other transit services up and down in our area and elsewhere, how much it costs, how much the return is from fares. That would be good information to share with everyone.
Thank you. I'll bring that back.
You had something, Counselor?
I'm all in favor of not having any fares on our buses.
I have one more question, and I don't know if, this is the appropriate time or venue. It is transportation related. On one of the few AMPO board meetings that I sat in on, they were discussing the expansion of routes from Jefferson to Albany. And I'm wondering, is now an okay time to ask about that? Have you
He's
been?
the guy, so yeah.
I am the guy.
Yeah.
So that, we did quite a bit of work, if you recall, working with Salem Kaiser. It was their baby, so to speak, that we're trying to make that connection through Jefferson into Albany and then back to Salem and Millersburg. And they wound up dropping that project because it was going to cost too much money. And of course, they welcomed us to start it all on our own. And I respectfully declined. It would, not that service to Jefferson isn't important, it's just it wouldn't really be fair for us to do it all on our own.
Even leaving Salem out of the loop and just doing Jefferson, Albany, Albany, Jefferson, is that anything we might be able to consider?
We've talked about that quite a bit over the years, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? So it gets complicated. Do you do it one day a week? Do you do it twice a day? Do you do it
Right,
all day?
right.
How much does Jefferson pitch in to the match?
Maintenance, yeah.
'Cause there's federal money that we get because Jefferson's in our MPO, but there's match that has to be matched, that federal money to provide service. So if Jefferson, of course, doesn't have much to give, being a small town, but Walt and I have had a lot of conversations from Jefferson, and it's not that it's impossible. There's a lot of variables to how it starts and who you have everything from where do you pick up to it probably involve not that we couldn't do it on our own, but it would involve some kind of a study to see if it's worthwhile.
Well, I appreciate the update because I didn't see that here, and I knew that I had heard about that in the
Yeah.
past, that we were looking to expand into Jefferson because they're in our AMPO district, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think this is my last slide. It's just a reminder that we're really happy with our real-time bus information. If you have the transit app, you can find out where your bus is from your phone, a data plan, of course, and how far away it is, and it's in real time. So it keeps you maybe from standing in the cold like it's going to be next week. I believe that was all.
Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
And we'd definitely like to learn more from you going forward. But yeah, great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council.
So next on the agenda is AMC Title 7.84.270, trespassing by Officer Shindell, page 2 and 3 in your packet.
Good day, Council. I should be pretty brief. I just wanted to bring to your attention a couple things in the memo. So we are pretty, what should I say? We don't use emergency clause often, because that's what it's for, emergency
Can't hear you.
or.
Go closer.
Hello? Okay. So the emergency clause isn't used often because of what it indicates. Once it's signed, it goes into effect. The code that I'm proposing to update is based on something that was in effect, but with the code change from 18 to 8, nullified that, and I'll explain why. So the trespassing clause or code references 18.28101, dangerous buildings. Within that code, under section K, it refers to 1830, which we just removed, repealed, and then moved to chapter 8 or title 8. With that removal, that code can no longer be used on the dangerous buildings for that property maintenance specification. So the need to add 8.05, which is the new property maintenance code, to it, just to continue that actual enforcement that was already allowed by the code, is important, because when we do vacate a house or come across a house that's a vacant foreclosure and has issues, oftentimes we find spikes in crimes in that area and alike, so making sure we don't have that gap is important, whereas right now it's gone. So an emergency clause is there to cover that gap and not give us a 30-day window of not being able to help out when that arises.
Counsel?
Is there anything pending, or is this something that happens on a, like, twice a month basis? How often is it actually used?
I mean, so right now I couldn't tell you the exact amount of houses I have that have this designation, but it's probably around 10. They tend to go in waves. So when they first come across my radar, we'll see 2 to 3 weeks of intense squatting, doing random things on the property. Oftentimes it'll die off after that. And then depending on how long it stays vacant or how long I'm talking to the bank, we'll see waves going up and down. Right now we have one that was recently vacated for a myriad of reasons that we're still having complications with.
Thank you.
Any other counselor? Okay. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the topic we talked about earlier, TLT policy update, Director Yeager and City Attorney Sean Kidd. On pages 4 through 6 in your packet.
Good evening. Oop, am I on? Okay. Tonight, we bring forward a updated TLT policy. This is needed because we need to align this policy with other financial policies that we have in the city. The other one was had too much information in it. It was basically budgeting in that policy, and we shouldn't do that. Our policy should be more overarching, and that's what this policy does. Sophie took this to the TLT committee, and they voted on it with some changes. She's outlined those in the memo, and we would like to move forward with getting this one approved so we can be more in compliance with state law, with procurement rules, and with our own city's financial policies and how we handle those types of things.
Okay.
Counselor Kobzinski.
Did you have an opportunity to read what was just presented to us at the beginning of the meeting?
I did not. I heard it. You know, I think one of the things with this policy is that we were trying to do what council had asked us to do, which was to focus the attention of this committee on tourism-related activities. And we're trying to do that through the mandated piece of that, which is the 44.5%, and really put that focus on those types of activities rather than, that's where their expertise lies. And so we, would be more than happy to involve the committee in the stakeholders process when we go out for services. We are certainly willing to have them be part of the selection process. And that's what we think it should be.
Okay, I would hope that you would at least have, take a look at what the proposed language is. It may, like I said, it seems awfully innocuous, and if it gives a more transparent look to it, why not?
So, and Counselor, I did take a look at it, and the one thing that I wanted to point out is there's language that was added that says advise on TLT revenues and expenditures. TLT revenue and expenditures makes up a good portion of that is going to go towards tourism. And right now, like Gina said, was 44.5%. That's the floor. That's the minimum amount that can be spent on tourism. Traditionally, I think every year we spent close to 70% on tourism. And having that flexibility, the council has to spend at least 44.5% on tourism. They could spend much, much more on tourism. It's up to the council on how much they want to spend. But that's the legal floor. We have to spend that much. But when we say advise on TLT revenues and expenditures, there is a portion of that money that comes in that is spent on things like roads or police and things like that. And a general statement of advising on TLT revenues and expenditures would imply then that the TLT committee, is going to be, right, the tourism committee is going to be advising us on police expenditures or fire expenditures or road expenditures, where that's not the intent. And I don't think that's their intent either. But so I think some wordsmithing, we might be able to come up with something that would, we could agree on that. But 100% of that money, unless the council said we want to spend 100% of TLT money on tourism, it wouldn't make sense for them to advise on all of that money, because some of that's going to be spent on things that have nothing to do with tourism.
Okay, so I'm not reading it correctly, that I'm inferring that they still have the opportunity to advise on anything they wish.
Correct. So if they came in and said, well, we saw the revenue and expenditures and we think you should spend, some new ball fields, turf some ball fields, or do whatnot, and then the council can decide, well, how much are we spending on tourism this year? On the recommendation, we're going to spend this, and this, and that's going to be, I'm making up a number here, 65% this year on tourism, or 72%, whatever that's going to be. And then the rest would go into the general fund, could be spent on pretty much anything. That amount would be probably something that the council would want to make those recommendations, or those decisions on themselves, and not the tourism committee. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. I would like to honor their request that was put forth this evening to keep their name and the oversight of the funds. And I'm just in favor of that. I support that.
So, Councilor, they don't have oversight of the funds.
Of the TLT
That's us. That's us. We have
But they
oversight of
have-
the funds. They can make recommendations, but not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like them to retain the ability to make the recommendations and to keep their name as they requested.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the council has already decided to create a tourism advisory committee.
Yeah.
So it was not the case that we promised that, you'll recall when we had this discussion, the council was concerned that a committee remain existent. Because at the time, we talked about incorporating them into an economic development advisory committee. So the committee is still existent, but it is your intent, as we understand it, to focus their efforts and their attention on promoting tourism. So what this does allows them to be focused entirely on tourism. And so that's what you see, I think, reflected in that language. And they're not going anywhere. They're very much a tourism advisory committee.
But is there an issue with letting them keep their name?
Well, you've already changed it to tourism advisory committee, and the issue with keeping TLT committee is just what the city attorney just explained, that there's a portion of those revenues that aren't spent on tourism. And we spend gas taxes on all kinds of things, right? As long as they're transportation related, but they don't advise on, gas station operators don't advise on all of those expenditures. So, I mean, there is a tourism advisory committee, and its focus is very, very distinct. And I don't know that to keep the transient lodging tax committee would accomplish the same thing.
I think the people that have been serving on the transient lodging tax committee are very committed for a number of years to that, and I don't want to see, like has happened with the changes that we make to some of these other commissions and committees, that people who've been on it are now stepping aside or pushed aside and we're bringing other people forward. I want these people to continue to serve and not be like,
It's the
Oh,
same committee.
yeah, we fully expect that they will continue to serve.
Just a name change.
okay, I don't mean to push this too hard, but is there any way that we could like do a compromise where it's TLT slash not transportation, sorry, transportation on the brain, TLT slash, tourism, thank you, I couldn't think of the word
These-
tourism.
These funds are taxes.
Yeah. Pardon?
These funds are taxes, and this is what Gina was trying to explain, that they're, and I would say they're designed in part to mitigate the effects of all travelers, all transients, transient people in our community, not just tourists. So therefore, it would be inappropriate for a tourism advisory committee to advise on how we spend money in a police department or a street maintenance.
Or parks, or whatever, yeah.
Well, I don't think they're asking to do that.
Well, that's what it is. If you call it the TLT committee, we're partially using TLT for that.
That makes sense to me. Counselor?
Does changing the name mean you have to get rid of the people that are on the TLT committee and appoint a new batch of?
No, not at all. And as I
People on the new
just mentioned to Councilor Novak, we fully expect that they will continue to serve.
So they will be asked if they want to continue serving.
Well, they always have the right to, determine their own future, but our expectation is that if you're serving a term, and unless you have conflicts in your schedule, that you'll continue to serve that. So there's no proposal to council to change the makeup of that committee.
And staff doesn't have any plans down the road to consolidate that into something else?
No.
Like they have with other commissions? Because that would really.
No, that's what we talked about a couple of months ago. And council's expressed intent was to keep the Tourism Advisory Committee distinct and existent.
Along with TLT, distinct and existent.
No, the committee formerly known as the TLT Committee would be known as the Tourism Advisory Committee. It was a name change. But the people don't change.
Sir, Mr. Mayor?
So, go ahead, Counselor Johnson.
That was one of my questions. So it's just changing the name.
Right.
Right.
And because the way it was sounding, it was like two committees. I understand that.
Right.
But
No, it's one committee.
The same folks.
it's the same, yeah. It's not TLT, it's TAC. So we're good with that. Then I think what you're talking about was in the methodology and allocation is including those that are not tourism related. So that's where we could be spending like police or
Right.
something like that during our events and things like that.
Right.
Okay. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you Wednesday. Thank you, Director.
I've got a further question, I believe.
Okay, John, do you have another question? Gina, Director Yeager?
So money comes in, we tax the hotels and motels.
All right, let me correct that, sir. We're not taxing the hotels and motels. We're taxing the people who stay there. So the hotels and motels are just collecting the tax from the person who stays there and forwarding it on to the city.
I think that's a semantically fine
It's,
line you can.
it's very important that we recognize that it's not semantics. It's a transient lodging tax, not a tourist lodging tax. So it's meant to mitigate the effects of people who come through the city and their impacts on the city.
Okay, so you want to define it as any problem they cause in the city. Is that what you're talking about?
Can you repeat the question?
No, I think the original idea of the transient lodging tax was that people come here and they stay in our hotels and motels, and we extract a tax either from them or from the hotels or motels. I think the hotels would say that we're cutting into their income, taking part of their income.
No, it's definitely,
The hotels don't say that?
it's definitely not their income. In fact, if it wasn't forwarded to the city, it wouldn't be collected. It's a tax. It's a tax that's been imposed upon travelers. The market is a free market, and hotels can raise their prices up and down as much as they want, but they can't charge a tax.
And we do allow the administrators at the hotels, the people who run the hotels, to keep 5% of those taxes that they collect on our behalf as part of an administration fee for them. So they are passing on 95% of the taxes that they collect on our behalf.
So anyway, if we didn't have a hotel motel tax, the hotels and motels would have 9% more income. So
Have one?
anyway.
No, because they can't charge a
My point I
tax.
want to make is that the money that comes in should be spent in increasing the number of people that are staying at hotels and motels. And so I would think that we need some kind of program or whatever to encourage people to come here as tourists and stay overnight in our facilities.
We do have that.
We do have that program.
And so I think the more money we spend on that, the better, as far as hotels and motels are concerned.
That would be against,
And if I were a hotel, I would object to you spending it on paying salaries to city employees if they weren't doing tourism kind of stuff.
so that would be,
I think I'd object to supporting our police department, or your police department, if I'm a hotel, out of my money that I lose, no matter whether you call it a tax or a tax on the people that come here or whatever. But so if you don't call it a hotel motel tax, you get to the point where you kind of ignore the hotels and motels and their
no.
input as to how you spend the money.
No, if you heard what Gina said, there's 44.5% minimum, and usually we've gone well above that. And I think, Councilor Olson, that you're mistaken, that the legislative intent,
Hotel motel tax.
the legislative intent of this tax was to help mitigate the effects of transients, as well as to help with tourism marketing and promotion.
Oh, so you feel transients that come and stay in our hotel and motel are problems?
They put wear and tear on our streets. They use our fire and rescue services. They sometimes can use libraries. They can call on police services. So certainly they have an impact. Absolutely.
I've never thought of them as that.
Thank you very
I thought
much.
of them as guests rather than problems.
Well, I didn't say problems. I just said they have an impact on the city.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, City Attorney. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you to just, if I could get the city attorney to talk about why we have to take this step in terms of compliance and risk?
So part of the new policy is just to make sure that we're in compliance with procurement laws. And we have been out of compliance with procurement laws on this since that's Gene, I think 2017, something like that. So when we're going out to secure an organization to provide services for almost everything in the city, we have to do it through public contracting and procurement laws. And if we don't, then we can be sued. So we just want to make sure that we're in compliance with the procurement laws in doing this. This will bring us into compliance with that. And we want to make sure that there's no, ultimately, if we violate procurement laws, there's potential personal liability for that. So we want to make sure we protect you as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a sort of point of clarification. The state created the procurement laws, and the state will sue us for not complying with them?
No, the state won't sue. I mean, the state can fine us for it, but they won't sue us for it. So for an example, I'll just make up something here.
A vendor.
What's that?
A vendor.
Yeah, a vendor, or say we had a big sewer project that we had to do in the downtown. We had a major sewer eruption or something, and so we had to replace the sewer line in the first 3 blocks of downtown Albany. And we said, well, instead of going out for contract, we're required under the law, we have to go out for bid on that, do a request for proposals and have sealed bids, open them and whatnot. And instead we said, well, we know our friend Fred, he's a plumber, and Fred's always done good work for us, so we're going to hire Fred to do the work, and we're not going to advertise it. If we did that, then anybody else who would have bid on that project could turn around and sue the city and say, you violated the statutes and the law, and now whoever agreed to do that could be held personally liable in a court if in fact we would lose on that, which we likely would. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Can you please help me understand what was TLT, if we are having to change the name to, forgive me, again, I can't think of the word, all I can think of is transportation. Tourism,
yeah,
thank you. If we have to change the name, so how on earth, what exactly, this procurement, which they have to go through in order to receive funds in the future, is that correct?
No. So the TLT money that comes in from hotels, motels, VRBOs, and the whatnot, that money is then, when we receive that money, the tourism, now you got me,
Sorry.
advisory.
Sorry.
The new tourism committee will make recommendations to the council on how to spend a portion of that money on tourism-related activities. And it has to be about 45%. It may be much more than that. And then what's not considered tourism-related expenditures that we're going to spend that year, then the council would say, well, we're going to put X amount into whatever. I mean,
Reserve.
So, Councilor Novak, I think the confusion comes from this. The resolution that you have in your packet does 2 things. One, it establishes the TLT policy, which brings us into compliance with state law, which is what you've just been talking about. And 2, a separate issue, it changes the name of the committee to Tourism Advisory Committee. Those 2 are not related.
Okay, I'm still, forgive me though, because I'm still not entirely clear on how procurement fits into, with regard to TLT and how those funds were traditionally divvied up, and we have the ADA and the AVA, and when you gave the example of opening things up for bids. So does this mean that, like, there are other entities, outside agencies that are going to be competing with the ADA and the AVA for tourism funds?
There could be.
Yeah, so we don't know. We don't, because we.
But so how do we, so is there's going to be some space of time where we say, who else wants some of these dollars? And then we wait some certain specific period of time to see if anybody jumps in and says, we want it. Is that how this works?
So what the process would be is Diane Merzinski, who came and presented to Budget Committee earlier this year, she would get together with the Tourism Advisory Committee and talk to them about what types of services that they're looking for, what they think is important for Albany. So they would be included in the stakeholders meeting for that. So then they would develop an RFP, which is a request for proposals, and then that would be advertised, and it would go out to, we advertise it in the local paper, we advertise it in other journals, we put it on our website, but it would go out, and then different entities, whether it's the AVA, for example, or a different marketing firm, would be able to submit their proposal for the job. So then you have a selection committee who would go through and look at the criteria. Part of that RFP would be setting up the criteria that the TAC would help develop. And then they would go through and they would look at costs, they would look at different criteria and determine who would do the best job for the city. And at that point, a contract would come back, contract would be awarded by council to whatever company was the best choice for the city.
So where we could still consider the AVA and the ADA What you're saying is legally, we have to open it up to anybody else and their mother who might be interested in those funds. And where does ORLA fit in this? Because they've been wanting a meeting. They reached out to all of us and got no response from anyone but me. Where does ORLA fit in?
I'm meeting with them next week.
Great, because I think that they're valuable and I value their input. I guess I really, you all know how I feel about the state pushing things down on us and saying, you must because we say so. I really, really take issue with that. And what I don't want to see happen here, and I know everybody knows this too, some of us have a real heart for the ADA and the AVA. These are people who live in our town, work in our town, are invested in our town. I personally, if the state forces us to open things up to people who don't even know us and don't live here, and maybe they do, I don't know, maybe there's somebody interested in tourism that I just know nothing about, but the people that have been for years now, decades, investing themselves in putting Albany on the map and advertising Albany and in going throughout the state and telling people why they should come here and even to other states and putting us out there, I don't want to see them have to wait extra X amount of time to get funds that they need to operate. They, to my mind, they have proven themselves to be A-plus stewards.
They just said
Yeah.
that 44.5% minimum
At least,
was
yes, I
spent on
understood that.
tourism. And we've spent more over time. So why wouldn't it be fair, not fair, to go out for public dollars? Those are our public dollars. We're responsible for those, not to let other people bid on projects. That makes no sense.
Well, no,
That goes against capitalism. That goes against America. We can't just protect one group.
Well, all I'm saying, my point, sir.
We're going compliance. That's what we're trying to be, is
Yeah,
compliant.
well, yeah, I take issue, as I've said, with the state dictating things that we have to do. And I understand that, yeah, free market, let other people in, fine. Where I have a problem here is that I know that this just increases the amount of time to where the funds are available for agencies like the ADA and the AVA to do what they do. And I happen to highly value what they do. So-
That's not correct, though, Councilor,
not
because it doesn't delay funds at all. And we do RFPs and we have contracts all the time. And as a matter of fact, the AVA currently operates under a contract with the city. It's just
I know.
not process developed in accordance with good stewardship practices, not just ORS. It's the stewardship of public funds that the mayor was talking about.
Well,
Thank you.
I honestly, I think these agencies have proven themselves to be excellent stewards of our funds, and I hope they will continue to do what they're doing, and I hope that we can do what we're doing without putting unnecessary roadblocks in the path of those who I think do a lot of
Their
good.
contract is not in jeopardy. They have to renegotiate their contract with the terms of the contract and come back and put in what they're going to do for us. This is being blown way out of proportion. Each of those organizations have contracts. When a contract term comes up, they renegotiate the contract, we move forward. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
So
And I
we're
would
not
add,
taking anything away. The TLT committee is now called the TAC committee, or Transit Tourism Advisory Committee. That's it. And the other piece, we're just making, we're compliant with state law. Whether you like state law or not, that is the law that governs this state. We have to follow those rules, whether we like it or not. There's some rules that I don't like either, but we still have to follow those rules. That's what we're elected officials. Our job is to follow state law. Whether we like it or not, that's our job. You can rail against it all you want, but that is our responsibility. So thank you. I think we beat this cow enough. I'm going to move on to business from the council. Thank you, Director. Thank you, City Attorney. Business from the council. Councilor Johnson?
I'd like to talk some more about this TLT thing.
We've moved on. Councilor Johnson?
Okay. I just want to say that in the city manager's words from last Friday, I was really sorry to hear that the community pool hot tub, it has to be decommissioned. And I just wondered if there's any plans to go forward. I just happened to be in a hotel that had a great, I mean, it was a very sturdy handicap, chair that people, I mean, I just noticed, I didn't take a picture, I wish I would have, but I just wondered if there's what are the plans?
I would ask Director Lodane to address that question and then remain seating there for something following that.
Okay. Councilor Lodane, Director Lodane, welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. Oh, you can hear me. Yes, it is sad. I can't tell you how many hours and caulk, love, conversations have gone into that hot tub since 1988, which is incredible to think that that's how long it's been there. There are fundraising efforts underway by the grassroots group, which is amazing. They've fundraised over $20,000, most of that through cans and bottle collection, which is phenomenal. I continue to have conversations with the school district, since we only manage that facility and we don't own it. It's one of those interesting situations where it's not necessarily our facility to 100% invest in and make those decisions, especially when, to be very frank, in past budget conversations, the pool has been on the chopping block, so it's difficult to say, yes, the city is going to invest X dollars in a facility that isn't ours, and that, unfortunately, at some point may end up back on the chopping block. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. And so kind of with all of those things in tandem, fundraising continues. We're going to look to see if we can allocate some additional funds towards the spa in the future, but it wouldn't be the full amount, but hopefully enough to help that group go out to find matching grants and whatnot. Does that help?
It really does, because, at least there's just some hope. I imagine everyone thought the same thing I did when they read it. It's like, oh my gosh, So we'll
it
just
is
keep
an
our fingers crossed. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kopsinski?
Santa Claus is looking for more kids to sit on his lap at the carousel.
That it? You do a great job as Santa, by the way. Councilor Novak?
Thank you. I was actually seeking Director Lejane out earlier. Glad you're here. I had a constituent reach out to me recently. He is in North Albany, and he had approached me with a request for further development of Gibson Hill Park. He would love to see some tennis and pickleball courts. I would dearly love to see some pickleball courts, and he asked me, how do we go about this? Is there a budget process? What do I need to do to make this happen? And so I'll just ask you, I don't know if I should give you his contact information or give him yours.
I believe we've already been in contact, and I told him to reach out to a city councilor.
And so he did.
Which is awesome, as our CIP projects are based off of the budget and what has been identified in the master plan. And so at this point, we do not have the funding to, well, you've seen our master plan. We don't have the funding to accomplish all of the things in that. With that said, if there's direction from council in the future as to potentially moving around some of those priorities, we can look at those, but it would need to have the finances to go along with it.
And if this gentleman and people in that community want to pool funds, as the folks have who wanted to keep that hot tub going, could they do a private something and work with the city to implement some courts out there? Or?
We are very fortunate that we do have a partner agency, the Albany Parks and Recreation Foundation, which is a separate 501c3. So if they are interested in doing fundraising, they can actually provide those funds to the foundation for specifically pickleball-related activities or tennis-related facilities, and then we can take that into consideration as we move forward with looking at development.
So I should direct him to reach out to, what's it called again?
The Albany Parks and Recreation Foundation.
Thank you.
And if it's the same person, I'll send him an email to let him know.
That would be super. I bet it is.
Totally good. But yes, it's thank you for bringing it up, as it's important to have these conversations and for council to know.
Thank you. Yeah, and if it turns out that we're nixing some other park, I will remember this being a pickleball player, and I'll say North Albany wants pickleball, because we have done for a long while. Thank you.
What's the status of the pickleball courts at Hackelman?
So they are at the end of their useful life, like many of our resources. And so with the opening of LBCC and those 12 pickleball courts, we are continuing to I hate to say this, but have the Hackelman courts kind of limp along as we try to figure out how we are going to reinvest in those courts. Will they be tennis? Will they be pickleball? Will they be both? Will they be another amenity that we don't have in the community? Those are questions to continue to look at as we move forward.
Counselor, are you good? Are you?
I can say that the pickleball community still enjoys those courts and would love to see them rehabilitated in spite of LBCC, and we're thankful for LBCC very much so. But yeah, if we can rehabilitate them, people will play.
I went to the last pickleball tournament and welcomed everybody at LBCC. Oh my, there's a lot of folks out
Yes,
there.
there are.
There's a lot of.
Pickleball is a force
Huge.
to be reckoned with.
Yes.
Yes, way bigger
So-
than tennis, just going to say. And Albany has a tennis club, so yeah, I don't know. I'm just cheering on the pickleball. I want to see what we can do.
Anything additional, my counselor?
Yes,
Anything
sir.
else?
That was my only.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah, that was my only thing for tonight.
Counselor Olson?
Yeah, I'm still confused on this TLT thing. And the last talk we got from our finance director, I got the impression that the AVA and the ADA would have to present proposals. And they would be in competition from people from, say, Company X from Seattle, Company Y from Portland, Company Z from Washington, D.C. or someplace. And if they lost their proposal, that would essentially be the end of our local AVA and our local ADA. Now, is that correct? Instead,
Well-
we'd have somebody from Seattle or Portland or San Francisco come in and do the stuff that our AVA and ADA have been doing
This is,
till now.
I would invite Gina to come up and comment if she wants to, but I think that's jumping the gun quite a bit.
Well, that's what I heard her say.
Right. That's right. That's what the policy is designed to make sure that our stewardship of funds is done in an appropriate way. There's something that goes beyond that, too. It's our own commitment at the local level with our procurement policy to do the same thing. But whether that immediately turns into an RFP, now remember, when you create an RFP, it's not a simple process. It takes a while. So there are contract extensions that we can execute, and there are limits also to the amount of proposed expenditures that require to go out for an RFP. So the AVA is a bigger organization than the ADA, and Gina, perhaps you could comment on the difference between
And
the
so I'd like to ask, who judges on the quality of these proposals that come from
Right.
Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, or wherever? Is that the budget committee?
Gina, why don't you
Is that
explain,
your,
when we go through an RFP,
what do you call your new committee?
When we go through an
Tourism committee?
when we go through an
Or
RFP,
is it the city council? Do they have anything to say about it?
okay, we'll try to answer your question.
yeah, I can try to answer your questions for you. So, excuse me, when we go through the RFP process, and we have a selection committee who goes through and they rank each of the different criteria and each of the different companies on those criteria.
Okay, now do you propose the criteria
So
that these various people have to answer to?
so the criteria would be developed by the stakeholders, and Diane
Who are the
Brzezinski.
Who were they?
stakeholders?
This, as I mentioned earlier, the stakeholders would include the tourism,
Advisory?
the TAC, the Tourism Advisory Committee. Sorry, no, I'm getting mixed up on the name.
So
we
they
would-
come up with a list of things.
They would come up with a list
that
of things
you have
that
to
they think
respond.
are important, and those are the things that we would develop the RFP around.
man.
Now, there are certain things that we can legally do and certain things that we can't. So Diane, who is an expert in this, would help guide that process. Then, once we received proposals, they would each be graded against the criteria, and then we would have a recommendation for council to approve a contract to. So although we can't do a local preference in this, we can put criteria in there that say that they need to have knowledge of Albany, and they need to have, we need somebody who knows our area and what we want. So we can put certain criteria in there as long as we can do that legally. But the Tourism Advisory Committee would be part of that stakeholders meeting and help us determine the criteria for the RFP.
Yeah, it looks like a program for disaster to me. I'm glad I'm out of here to tell you the truth.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Directors. Do you want any other? So next is Councilor Bartholomew and then Councilor Smith.
Hi, Director Ledane. I just was wondering how much was needed for that new hot tub?
So the latest bid that we've received several that vary between $150,000 to $300,000. And those aren't official bids because we haven't gone through the city's procurement process, but that's what the grassroots group has received. So that way we have at least some sort of goal for the fundraising thermometer. Should we come to a point where we do have enough money that, yes, it does look like we'd be able to move forward with the project, then we would have to go through the same official procurement process and put out for 3 bids and have to go through that.
I have the latest they sent me.
Would you address the need for ADA compliance as well?
Oh, yes. Question has come up as that's a lot of money for a hot tub. So with us being in a public facility that was created before the ADA, as you can imagine, it is in need of some TLC. So if we make any sort of change to that spa or hot tub, then it does have to be ADA compliant, which is wonderful, and that's who we want to continue to serve. But that does make it a more costly project as it involves in-grounding, and it is a facility that is 40 years old. So that is what makes the price tag on it go up.
Councilor Smith? Thank you very much. I have just, I guess we missed the gentleman walking from Boston to Newport, Oregon, but they were greeted by folks at the VFW and the American Legion Post 10, and I'm hoping they make it successfully and safely to Newport. They'll be stopping in Philomath tonight. Philomath will welcome them and talk with the mayor, and then they'll be heading on to Newport. Hopefully be there by the 17th. And that's it. At this time, City Manager report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 3 things for you. Parks has received a request to rent Bryant Park for Paddle Oregon. And in the past, we've helped Paddle Oregon celebrate, and we've welcomed them. However, this year, we're simply going to process their application. And the reason for that, as you will remember, is that they're organized by the Willamette River Keeper. And I think the memory is still fresh about how they have recently treated the city. The second thing is that this Thursday night, we'll have onboarding of 2 of our new counselors. And then the third one we'll do that on Monday morning, which will include quite a bit of information. You all will remember when you were first on the council and how you drank from a fire hose. And then lastly, I'd ask the city attorney to talk a little bit to you about the procedure for the Luther appeal, which you will have Wednesday evening.
Thank you. So you might remember several months back now, I hate this microphone. I'm going to come up there, I think. But you might remember, actually.
It's the metal plate.
So, several months back, Ms. Darla Luther came into the council and from Business from the Public. I believe it was on a work session. I mean, maybe it was a council meeting, but it was Business from the Public, and asked you to consider either changing your code or not applying the way the code was written right now to her, which is to say that she is required to get a backflow device on her auxiliary water system. She has since hired an attorney who has filed an appeal to the city council. And how that works is if someone is aggrieved of a decision by the public works director, the way our code is written, and it's outdated, it says that they would apply to the public works committee an appeal. Public works committee doesn't exist. And last week we looked at, we couldn't see any record of it since 1998. but there's a direct appeal from that board to the city council if they didn't agree with that decision. So this is an automatic appeal to the city council. So on Wednesday night, Ms. Luther will be here with her attorney. His name is Bob Tyler, and they will be appealing the decision that the director made requiring a backflow device on her well. What we're going to do is treat that similar to how a Court of Appeals hearing is held or a Land Use Board of Appeals hearing is held. And so they will sit up here at the podium, and then likely myself and Chris Bailey or Scott LaRock, or maybe all three will sit on the other side, or if it's not enough room, we'll just come up after. And we're going to allow 15 minutes from each side to state their case. The 15 minutes is inclusive of questions. So if you have questions that are of substance to what's being said to either the staff, myself, or when they're doing their presentation their side to Ms. Luther or her attorney, then please ask it. But if you have opinions or things like that, I would caution that you would keep those till after the hearing is over and you're deliberating. Because after both sides have presented their case, then you as the decision makers will deliberate and decide that night whether or not to uphold the decision of the Public Works Director or to overturn it in say that she doesn't have to have a backflow device. I've talked to the attorney for Ms. Luther on this already, so they know what to expect. And I just so there's no hiccups or anything like that. I believe they will be here on Wednesday night. I say that because they told me Friday they objected to the meeting or the hearing being on Wednesday night because they didn't think that it would have a full council, or that they wouldn't have that this council was going out. We're losing 3 of our councilors, which is not a good argument, because under that theory, we wouldn't have a city council meeting or this work session tonight if we went by that. But in any event, we have it on the schedule for 6 o'clock, or shortly after we start our public hearing on or our meeting on Wednesday night, and we will go through that. And I'm here to answer any questions that may have for now.
Councilor Novak?
Okay. Yeah, did I hear you correctly? You said that if we have questions, we should ask them during the 15 minutes
Yes.
allotted? Because
Yes, so-
that burns up the time that they have.
Well,
or
if
that
you have so if they're in the middle of asking or making their presentation, and I'm just making up stuff as examples here. She says, "Well, I've lived there. I've lived at this my house here. I've never had a problem. It's never been connected to city water." You might say, "Well, how long have you lived there?" Okay, I've lived there for 10 years. Okay. Or you might ask, have you ever had it connected to city water? Those are things you can ask then. But if you wanted to say, well, gosh, I don't understand why we're requiring this. This doesn't make sense. Something like that. That's when you would keep that for deliberations, because it does eat up the time. But if you have clarifying questions of either Ms. Luther and her attorney or the staff, that would be the time. But I would caution if Ms. Luther and her attorney are doing their presentation for 15 minutes, only ask questions of them, not of the staff. Wait until the staff is doing their presentation to ask questions of them, because you don't want to take her time up asking a staff question. So, and then you can also ask clarifying questions after this hearing is over, and then you guys have an opportunity to deliberate on this as well. So this is a hearing, and it's in a public meeting, but it's not considered a public hearing. So you don't have testimony from members of the public that are going to come up and speak to this. This just happens to be at a public meeting.
So business from the public will follow that discussion.
That would probably be the best thing. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to go with Councilor Olson.
Yeah, just one last thought, because I think I heard you say that they wanted to wait until the new council was seated, and is there any reason why they wouldn't be permitted to do that?
If this council decided they didn't want to have the hearing on Wednesday night, it's well within your discretion to do that. I would say we couldn't think of a reason why not to have it Wednesday.
Well, I'm just thinking if they don't show up because they would prefer to have the newly seated council hear it, then
They don't get that option, though. They asked for a hearing, and that hearing date was set a couple of months, at least a month ago out, and then this came up literally Friday afternoon, that they said, well, now, we may not want to do it then. So, just like, for example, in the morning, I will have a Land Use Board of Appeals hearing, and I can't call Luba and say, I don't want to do the hearing. I want to wait until the new board comes in January. They'll say, well, guess you're waiving your hearing. Then we'll decide on your brief. So
I see.
we don't want to do that. So
Counselor, you good?
Yes.
Counselor Olson?
Yes. Are these time limits? Is that something the council has decided in the past? Or are you asking whether we are approving of those time limits?
well, you can say to me tonight if you want to do it longer or shorter. It is actually your discretion. We've never had one of these appeals before. This is new. So the way I was going to structure this is how if we had a hearing at an appeals hearing at the Court of Appeals or at Luba, and treat them like that, so that we have some guidelines, and it's not a 4-hour back and forth that night in a public meeting. So
She's also presented for like 20 minutes before, right?
she did, she's presented her case before, and I'll say that I don't expect much in the way of different material being presented to you on Wednesday night. They feel that this is a requirement for them to go to the Land Use Board of Appeals. They feel like they need a denial from the council, a final decision to go to the Land Use Board of Appeals or the Circuit Court, which would be one of their next stops on this mission. So
So they get their 15 minutes, you get yours 15 minutes, and then we discuss it and come to a conclusion.
Yep, exactly.
And can we ask you a question
Yes.
during that time?
Yes.
And can we ask her or her attorney?
Yes.
A question during that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have any overall time limit.
No.
15 minutes for a presentation.
Right, 15 minutes.
And all these review.
Correct. That would be the way to do it.
And we deliberate afterwards, questions and stuff like that.
And ask questions.
Right.
Right.
Counselor Smith?
I don't understand how this could be appealed to the board or to Luba.
I don't either.
It's not a land use issue.
I don't either.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so with that, city manager, anything else?
Just apologies for Kim having to sit up there the whole time. I thought you might have questions about
Thank you.
I
paddle order.
appreciated the company.
Thank you, Director Delaine, I appreciate it. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. I'll see you on Wednesday. And we have a joint planning meeting following this meeting, so be back here at 5:30.
Are any of them going to come, or